That's the Showtime at the Apollo theme. Good brethren, Conrad, my comrade. How are you doing, sir?
I'm doing well. Point of fact, repeat guest at the hotel, he says the exact same thing. Conrad, my comrade. I'm just like, I don't know how to respond to that.
That's what's up. That's what's up. Hey, we have a great show today. We have two guests. One is my frat brother, Root to the Breast. The other one is a beautiful example of what needs to happen in the Hampton Roads area and beyond.
Exactly.
So who do we have on the show?
It'd be Sister Nikki Miller and Delegate Cliff Hayes, both from Hampton and Chesapeake.
That's what's up. Welcome to another great episode of the Beach Brothers
Show.
So look, the Beach Brothers Show is a show where we deal with Virginia business and politics.
Well, I'm Conrad Chesviner. I'm a Hampton Roads political activist. Best ideas for community improvement happen to drive me.
I help folks that are approaching retirement and in their retirement years.
I have what I call the empowerment agenda, and that means that everything I do is focused on empowerment. We want to give a salute to Tally and Twine. It's time for you to have a high quality watch made in Virginia, made in Portsmouth, Virginia, from Tally and Twine. We want to say thanks to Southern Volkswagen Greenbrier for their great level of sponsorship. If you need a new car, you don't need to go far. Southern Volkswagen Greenbrier. And ladies, if you want your brows to say, wow, check out IamLitaWee.com. Microblading by IamLitaWee.com. I'm Seiko Varner. I do credit fixes, tax resolutions. I lend private money to real estate investors, and we do debt consolidations. If you need any of these services, contact me as provided. And now it's time to get beachy on the Beach Brothers Show. All right, looking at my Tally and Twine, it's about that time for us to start things off beautifully with the podiums.
Who wants to go first today?
Yeah, I think I'll go first today. All right, good stuff, good stuff. Well, today's podium is going to be a very different stray from my normal foray into the world of empowerment. Today I'm going to talk about not a concept of empowerment, what you could do. We're going to talk about what we are doing. So today's show is also being simulcast on the platform for the Hampton Roads Black Caucus. So the Hampton Roads Black Caucus is an organization, a nonpartisan organization that really focuses on the interests of the Black community. And, you know, one of the political interests of the Black community. All right. So one of the things that we were doing in the HRBC is we're taking a deep look at our elected officials. We're taking a very deep look at our elected officials. And so my podium today is take a deeper look. Find out who is really working in your interests. You know, a lot of times I think politically people look at elected officials as either saviors or superstars. We love our saviors. We love our superstars. And I think we're looking at political officials, elected officials in the same vein. So we vote for them because we like them. We like their message. We think they're going to do something that's going to really change our lives, and then we fall back. And so when the next time comes around, when you have to take a deep vote of confidence for that person, you really don't know what you're voting on. You're not looking at their record necessarily. You're looking on the way they make you feel. You're looking at what they say they're going to do for you. So take a deeper look and say, hey, we voted some of these delegates in office, and we said, hey, we don't want qualified immunity. And the delegate said, hey, we agree with you. We think we should reduce that as well. And in Virginia, it didn't happen. Hey, you can look at your city council and city council and say, hey, we want this. And yeah, we want this. And it doesn't happen. The school board, it doesn't happen. Which means your interests are not being followed by the people that we place in office. So take a deeper look. Go to the city council meetings, school board meetings, but more importantly, write down what their votes are. So you can say, hey, this person did not vote in my interest. This person did vote in my interest. This person may not necessarily know my interests. But to do that, you have to take a deep dive, a deep look. So I'm imploring you, if you consider loving your community, if you consider loving your family, if you consider loving your future opportunities, then you have to look at the policies that impact you and yours. I implore you to take a deeper look at your elected officials, because in many times, in many cases, they're not looking at you. And I'm done. So, hey, one love to my beloved country, United States of America. 2 up and 2 down for VA. OHIO to planet Columbus, Ohio. Planet Columbus, Ohio. Columbus, Ohio is a planet. Brooklyn is a blood type. Yeah. We love you. Bro Khan, what's good?
I want to talk a little bit about what's coming up very soon this week. On paper, Juneteenth is kind of straightforward. In September 1862, President Abraham Lincoln, the first Republican president in U.S. history, signed the Emancipation Proclamation. Yes, it outlawed slavery, but specifically in Confederate territories. Interestingly enough, Maryland was excluded, which still had chattel slavery after the proclamation. Eastern Virginia, which was under Union control, also accepted. Even after the emancipation, the very area we host this show from still had people owning other people with no legal problem. True enough, it couldn't be enforced in Confederate places, and while Robert E. Lee did what good little Confederates do, and that's surrender, in April 1865, the Army of Trans-Mississippi surrendered on June 2nd. And on June 19th, Union General Gordon Granger landed on the island of Galveston, Texas, to take control of Texas Union's forces. His very first task was to read out plainly from General Order Number 3. The people of Texas are informed that in accordance with the proclamation from the Executive of the United States, all slaves are free. This involves an absolute equality of rights and rights of property between former masters and slaves, and the connection therefore existing between them becomes that between employer and hired laborer. That's on paper. But in spirit, Juneteenth is weightier. 4 entire generations after the words, "All men are created equal," were codified on a Declaration of Independence, written by a person who outright owned other human beings. The words, "All slaves are free," were spoken out loud to the state where everything's bigger. So you tell me what should make you more patriotic. You tell me what should give you more pride for the sake of an ever-improving union, because I'll echo words that you might have seen on shirts and Facebook memes this very week. Juneteenth, because my ancestors weren't free in 1776, or July 4th didn't set me free. Juneteenth is my Independence Day. Then we have today's Republicans, our very friends who wouldn't cease pointing out slave owners were Democrats, our Republican friends like Virginia Beach Delegate Glenn Davis, who'd pedantically say, on a status suggesting we celebrate Juneteenth in Virginia as fervently as we do St. Patrick's Day, that the document being celebrated expressly exempted freeing slaves in Eastern Virginia. That's not a good look, Delegate. It's not a good look knowing that the individuals who wanted to preserve Confederate monuments in Virginia and elsewhere were our Republican friends. It's not a good look knowing our Republican friends are the ones whining to our school boards about critical race theory and running for Virginia governor, lieutenant governor, and attorney general explicitly to say that they'll do away with CRT. which is a practice that would help underline why things like Juneteenth have cause for historical reflection and why so much more than just a holiday is needed right now. So, Beach Brothers Show friends, don't let them off the hook. Enjoy your Juneteenth and let the fight continue. So that's my podium.
Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. It's kind of intriguing to me because I started celebrating Juneteenth in 1991 here in the Hampton Roads area of Virginia. And so to see how things have changed since 1991 in relation to the celebration of Juneteenth has been interesting. So, yeah, I've been hearing the naysayers since 1991. And it is what it is. You know, every time you make progress, somebody sees regress. Good brother, speaking of progress, who do we have on today?
Well, our first guest is, I would like to say, a guest host. We had her on last week. That's Nikia Miller from Hampton. How you doing again? As I see you're muted.
Of course I'm muted. Hi!
That's the story of these things for the past year. We always find ourselves on mute right when we get on. Glad to have you back. We'd love to have you on as like a guest host now so we can get more community between Hampton and the South Side. We also have on the great delegate from Chesapeake, Mr. Cliff Hayes. And I want to do as much of an introduction as I can because he's pretty cool in my book. He is Chesapeake through and through. He went to Oscar Smith, played baseball and football for the Tigers. He beheld the green and gold, studying computer science at Norfolk State. He studied public policy at Carnegie Mellon and computer science and artificial intelligence at MIT. He's also studied at Harvard and Cambridge College and had more post-grad work both at NSU again and Regent, looking up urban affairs and leadership. And honestly, I'm sort of trying to condense this work because it's very extensive. He's worked in the city of Chesapeake's revenue office, the sheriff's office, their Department of Technology as well. He's taught computer science at various TCC campuses and was elected to 2 consecutive 4-year terms on Chesapeake City Council in 2004 and 2008. And he was elected in a special election in 2016 to Virginia's House of Delegates for the 77th District. That's where he chiefly serves now. And by the way, remember the election coming up in November. So I just want to reach back out and welcome you to the Beach Brothers Show. How are you, Delegate?
Well, good afternoon, Brother Conrad, Brother Seiko. It is indeed a pleasure to be on with you on this evening, and also to the lovely Miss Nikia Miller, who has joined us on this evening. And to your listening audience, it's a pleasure to be able to be with you on the Beach Brothers Show. I am excited about this evening's broadcast and excited about the fine work that you all do, talking all things politics, whether local with city council, school boards, the state level with your delegates, as well as the senators, or even on the federal level, where congresspersons have been a part of your broadcast as well. And as you know, that policy, that public policy, flows at every level. And it's up to us to make sure that in all cases, we understand clearly that we need to, as we do with our social media platforms, our streaming platforms, like StreamYard, like Zoom, or whatever else, we need to make sure that on a real level, that the citizens should be engaged and they need to unmute themselves. In other words, have a voice. And as policymakers, you need to make sure that all of your policy levels, makers and leaders are in the practice of lifting every voice, as Brothers Johnson so eloquently put it. Lift every voice. Is important for us to make sure that all voices are lifted and can be heard.
Excellent intro. I want to start off with a question about what's coming up also soon in June, Father's Day. I'm not a dad yet, and I know some exceptional dads. But I can't help but give my absolute respects to the tremendous family you've helped build with your wife, Keisha. Tell us about the creation of a great family and raising amazing women like Felicia and Tanisha.
Well, all I know is to try to live by a wonderful example that I had with two fine parents, and Clifton and Carolyn Hayes. And out of everything I heard you read off in my bio, all was true and some more. I've been blessed abundantly, I think, over my lifetime. But the greatest honor in my life has been to be the elder son of Clifton and Carolyn Hayes. They poured so much love into me and my brother that we don't know any better than to make sure that we pour that love not only into the kids that we have, but to let that overflow into the community. And so my wife, Kesey, and I are blessed to have two beautiful daughters, two aspiring daughters, in whom we pour into them as much love and dedication, kenosis that we can, so that they can be empowered in such a way that they will not only strive to be all that their desires are there before them to be and to find their purpose, but to make sure that not only that they aspire for their purpose, but that, as in many cases, there are so many people who are coming behind them that they understand it's important that as they scale the wall, is that they should throw the rope back for so many people who will be coming after them generations to come. That is what we try to pour into them, and we certainly hope that they will continue to obey by and understand and agree by the principles in which they've been taught. Our oldest, Tonicia, is a now third-year law school student at the University of Maryland in Baltimore campus. And then the youngest, Felicia, is a recent graduate of William and Mary in Williamsburg, and now has entered into their master's program. So these two sisters have devised a plan to have it so that we might be able to celebrate again next spring, as Tonicia will be graduating from law school at that time, and Felicia will be graduating with her master's from William and Mary. And we just stand on the tiptoes of anticipation, waiting for that day so that they can begin their little launch with their careers and fly on their own. Obviously, we're always going to be here for them, but we just love the path in which they're going.
That's amazing. Now, you've been serving in the General Assembly for a few years now, on several committees. Tell us about the committees you're on, and tell us about the inside of Virginia's great legislative body.
Yeah, so serving in the General Assembly, I'm just so blessed to do so. Obviously, we get committee assignments once we arrive, and so I happen to serve on the Health, Welfare, and Institutions Committee, which on the House side deals with all things healthcare. I also happen to have been appointed to the Joint Commission on Healthcare, and out of that commission, we study healthcare interests and issues and make proposed ideas for legislation when it comes to healthcare. I also serve on a committee entitled Communications Technology and Innovation, in which I actually serve as the chair of. So all things technology, broadband, cybersecurity, etc., all things technology and science all bills and legislation will come and does come before that committee. Another hat that I wear, I've been appointed to the Joint Commission on Science and Technology, or other words, referred to as JCOTS. And I happen to be the chair of that commission. That commission studies all things technology, science, engineering, math, etc. Those are two major assignments that I have in regards to topical issues when it comes to policy. But I happen to also serve on appropriations on the House side. So with that committee, we deal with setting a budget for the Commonwealth and making those proposals in terms of where the resources ought to be applied. I remember when I was actually in college, we had the good fortune of having then first African-American governor elected in the country and certainly in the Commonwealth, L. Douglas Wilder, come to speak. And as we met with he and President Wilson at the time in the president's conference room, I asked the question of then Governor-elect L. Douglas Wilder, what is the most interesting part of your job? He was coming off of having served as a senator at the time. And his response to me is he was happy to have worked on behalf of his constituents, certainly, trying to get a piece of the pie, if you will. But he also went on further to say that the most interesting and passionate part of his service is the fact that it's not only important to get a piece of the pie, but it's even better and sweeter when you're able to have your hand on the knife when the pie is actually being sliced. And so I akin my affection for service, just as Brother L. Douglas Wilder, Brother Seiko, who happens to be our fraternity brother. Again, shout out to the Qs, the men of Omega Psi Phi, L. Douglas Wilder as well. But it's wonderful to know that you're in a leadership position and your hand is on the knife when you're able to carve out and put priorities in places where they ought to be for funding for those most in need. We've been in a situation, I believe, in the Commonwealth for some 20, 25 years now, where the least, the lost, and the left out have been asking, have been needing, but have been ignored, ignored when they tried to raise their hand, prevented when they tried to unmute themselves. And we just think that now that our party has taken over, much of that stagnation, much of that obstruction has been able to be moved out of the way, as we have been able to, as I said earlier, allow all voices to be heard. Many people don't necessarily want to hear what it is that the people have to say. I just happen to disagree with that notion and that practice. It's important to allow all voices to be heard, even if the voices do not necessarily agree with you. We're in a democracy, and the people have hired us to represent them. And we need to make sure that we do all we can to never, ever forget the fact that you're representing, in my case, as a member of the House of Delegates, representing the constituents of the district in which you represent. That also happens to lend itself to some areas that might be represented by some who do not look out for the best interests of the people who actually live in their district. And they cry out for help quite often, honestly. And I think it's up to us to make sure that the democracy works the way that it has been promised to work. And so we hear, as I remember back into second grade learning the Pledge of Allegiance. But the most prevalent part of that pledge was that at the end of that, it ended with liberty and justice for all. And the problem we have today is folks want to stifle, want to block, and limit all voices and have liberty only for some. But we need to make sure that there's liberty and justice for all.
Definitely like that. I definitely need to point out that you are a representative of the 77th, which, by the way, is where you'll find 1248 South Military Highway. That's Southern Volkswagen. Remember, if you want a quality and expensive car to drive around Virginia's 77th district, you'll need to stop by Southern Volkswagen, strike up a conversation with Charlie Roy, and you're in business. But back to the 77th itself. What is that slice of Tidewater like? What's good? What's your favorite stuff around here?
Well, in the 77th House District, quite often we fight vigorously for those schools in the 77th that happen to be what many refer to as Title I schools. And in the city of Chesapeake, sometimes that's forgotten or lost when it comes to those children who need to be educated the same way that all of the schools, and the funding needs to flow, the assistance and the wraparound services that go along with that. Quite often, the social determinants that can hinder the progress of our young people and get in the way of them being all that they have been designed and they desire to be. As a delegate, I try to do all I can to make sure that there are pathways to help them reach their full potential. And so if that's education, I'm right there with them, trying to make sure that we have resources available for not only the education in the schools and the salaries of the teachers, but the salaries for those support services for education, like the cafeteria workers, the bus drivers, the custodians, the housekeepers, et cetera, and to make sure that we fund education much better. We're even working now to improve that to a level in which teachers will be paid above the national average. We think it's an atrocity to not be paying teachers at a level that they can actually live by. Many of our teachers are living on lower salaries, having to take up 2 and 3 other jobs. And we just think that for the work that they do, they need to be valued in such a way that we can get the best and the brightest caring teachers in the classroom that we need. When it comes to economic development in our communities, such as South Norfolk and College Park, et cetera, where I am, we need to make sure that we're able to create jobs in those areas and protect those jobs and do what we can to grow those jobs and employers, giving them the opportunities to create even more jobs for people that need them, and to pay them a living wage, to pay them what they're worth. In the General Assembly, I was so happy to have supported and fought hard for raising the minimum wage here in the Commonwealth of Virginia. But unfortunately, what happens sometimes with this process of legislation, it is a negotiation process, and people get in the way of full progress. And where we landed on that is to do it over a period of years versus just going straight into the $15 per hour. We're going to continue that fight. We're going to continue that work in such a way that we're hopeful that we can make that wage here in the Commonwealth happen much sooner. And I have every bit of confidence that that will happen. When it comes to health care, we need to make sure that we provide the health care quality, affordable access to health care that's going to allow our young people again to be all that they can be, and their parents, their family members to be all that they can be. I was proud to be a part of and fought for Medicaid expansion in the Commonwealth of Virginia. We were able to provide health care to now an additional 550,000 families that did not have access before because of the Commonwealth's constrained, confined practices and policies and laws when it came to Medicaid. Obviously, the Affordable Care Act provided the opportunities for states to have additional funding to provide access to care that the citizens needed. But what happened in the Commonwealth for many years, there was a stiff arm from the Republicans saying, no, we do not want $5 million per day that goes along with the Affordable Care Act. And so we were forfeiting $5 million per day by not expanding Medicaid. And certainly I was just so excited when we were able to expand Medicaid in the Commonwealth. This year, one of the proudest bills that I was ever able to carry was the Consumer Data Protection Act. The Virginia Consumer Data Protection Act actually is a piece of legislation that's going to say no more of this selling, sharing of folks' personal identifiable information without you knowing it. And so in the Commonwealth of Virginia, you will have the right to know what these companies are collecting about you when you go online. Not only should you have a right to know what's being collected, you should have a right to delete the information if you want to delete your information. If it is erroneous and incorrect, you should have a right to correct it if you want. And certainly, if the egregious practice of selling your personal identifiable information is going on, then you should have a right to say, I do not want my information sold, and then that practice should be stopped. I think that's a major piece of legislation that has passed, and Virginia has become only the second state in the United States with that legislation. Absent any federal legislation, we felt that the consumers of the Commonwealth of Virginia needed to have some protection. And with over 70% of the world's internet traffic flowing through the Commonwealth of Virginia, we felt like Virginia needed to be a leader in that space. We want to stop the practice of selling and sharing folks' information and data online. And the best way to do that is to get the attention of those companies that are selling and sharing the data. I think I just so happen to believe that enforcing this through the Attorney General's office is the best mechanism to do so. Because I can tell you, if Conrad, if Seiko, or if Nakia decides to, as individuals, go up against Google, Microsoft, Facebook, Amazon, IBM, etc., on your own, to say to them, stop sharing my data, good luck as an individual. But we believe that the Attorney General's office sending a note or a letter to these companies will get their attention at the corporate level. Another piece of legislation, recently carried and successfully passed, as you all know, in Virginia Beach. Off the coast of Virginia Beach is a wind turbine farm that's being developed. You have 2 turbines in the water now. My legislation authorized that would be able to have offshore wind, which equals clean energy. It equals jobs here in Hampton Roads, and it will generate enough energy and power to power up 1.2 million homes. And if we're saying we want a clean energy economy and to have clean energy and to end this whole thing of fossil fuels, then here's one great solution to that: offshore wind. The wind is always blowing off the coast. And think about in hurricanes, guess what? We're able to just generate even more power as the turbines will be turning. And we have been able to lay the cables and pump that electricity into the grid of the Commonwealth with the 2 test turbines, which eventually will turn into over 100 and some turbines there off the coast of Virginia Beach and Duck, North Carolina. Those are 2 major pieces of legislation that I have actually carried and successfully gotten through in these last 2 General Assembly sessions.
So, as a member of our state leadership, as a member of the House of Delegates, how does our state leadership support local leadership as far as education?
So the job for the Commonwealth of Virginia, the state law and Constitution says that any citizen child of the Commonwealth of Virginia is eligible for and qualified to receive a quality education. And so it's up to the state to make sure that we fund K through 12 education the way that we are supposed to, and to work with our localities to make sure that not only are we providing the means, but that the means actually turns into the kind of results that we want to see. That doesn't always happen through public education because, in government and in leadership at the state level as well as the local level, as we develop budgets, just know that we're in the business of dealing with unlimited demands with limited resources. And so it's up to us to do all we can to make sure that we pump the resources into the local level so that they can take care of most of the education. Then on the local level, usually in most situations, we send the resources down to our localities, and the localities need to make sure that they fund education as well. So you just got to stay on them and make sure that they make education a priority on the local level as well.
Now that actually ties into my next question. You also served on the Chesapeake City Council and in various other municipal capacities. What are some of the similarities and differences you've seen around these government bodies, and how do they feed into each other?
Yeah, like I said before, dealing in policy making and serving in an elected role, one of the challenges I notice on the city council, and I think this is true for any locality as well, is that you have unlimited demands with limited resources. So it's important for you to not only create an environment in which you can allow the resources to flow, but you set priorities to take care of all of the citizens of a locality. And that might require some creative thinking and ways to make that happen. For instance, I remember when I was on Chesapeake City Council, and in the area in which I grew up, a middle school was in desperate shape and needed to be replaced. That was Oscar Smith Middle School. And what I was told time and time again, even though the city council was passing on revenues to our school system, the administration said, well, right now we just don't have the money to replace that middle school. I knew that it needed to be replaced much sooner, and other leaders that I was working with, including the city manager, Dr. Clarence Cuffey, and others. What we were able to do is get creative, and so we created what we call a tax increment financing district, otherwise known as a TIF. And in that situation, although the school system said they didn't have the money to build the middle school and they had not planned for the replacement, we were able to save and set aside $1 million a year, committed over a 20-year period to build a new school. And so we were able to build Oscar Smith Middle School at a time when the school system said they couldn't see a way to build that school. So it takes creative thinking, and again, setting priorities, because that's what it's going to take. And to understand that the resources, the tax base that goes into local government, guess what? It's not only a few people who pay into that. It is all citizens who are paying into the general fund to take care of the resources. And so for those who want to go to private schools, hats off to them. One of our children went to private school. The other went the path of public schools. But we knew and understood that the investments we were making in private schools, then, hey, that was the best setting for her. But we were not asking the public to pay for a decision that we made to send her to private school. She got an excellent education. We're happy that that was the method that she needed to make her situation better. But we didn't need to ask for and did not want public resources paying for a private education. For our other daughter, she went the path of the public school system. And in that case, we want to make sure that the public resources are paying for the education that she is supposed to get. These arguments today about trying to take public resources and pay for charter schools or private schools, we are adamantly against, because we do not want to see public resources paying for private ideas. Nothing wrong with a private idea. Just understand, as you go down that road of trying to create a private school or your private idea, that's a decision that you make, that your family makes, and you all should come up with the resources to take care of those private situations.
I'd like to actually piggyback off of what you just said. As the Beach Brothers know, I have a situation with my daughter. We are Hampton residents, and we discovered at the end of March, before the schools let out for pandemic leave, that my middle daughter was being sexually assaulted in her elementary school.
Oh my gosh.
And that the assaults had been occurring for the better part of 2 school years. Yeah. It has been a fight from that point forward. My family asked Hampton City Schools for relatively low lifts. We asked for my daughter to be placed in the school of our family's choice, which Hampton City Schools refused. We asked that my daughter and her rapist, who was another student, never be in the same school again, and that Hampton City Schools give my daughter priority. And then we also asked that Hampton City Schools pay for my daughter's therapy, since these assaults occurred on school property on their watch. I agree with you when it comes towards charter schools. I think that the the choices of parents, when there is a avenue for their children to receive a public education, that is where the resources for for those funds should be. And that if they make the decision for their child to go to a charter school or to go to a private school, then that is that family's decision, and therefore should be up to that family to finance.
Mm-hmm.
The only difference that I have is in situations where a child's safety is in question, or if there is a valid no confidence vote in the school system, which is where my family is at this point. Because I feel that since Hampton City Schools cannot ensure that my daughter and the student who molested her will never be in the same school again, and my child be subjected to that, and there's no assurances that they will protect her, we've now as a family made we're now seeking that Hampton City Schools pay for my daughter's private education in order to ensure her safety. And what my question is that in situations where there's been a breach of confidence and a valid concern for the well-being of the student, would your position on charter schools or private education being funded by a public entity change?
Well, let me just say this, Sister Nakia. First off, and I just get the sense that you're already doing this, and I want to encourage you to continue to do this, and that is to continue to pour all the love that you can into your child. I'm sure that you already do, but it is so important to just keep pouring all of that love into your child so that she will understand that it is your daughter, right?
Yes, my daughter.
That she will understand that, despair does not have to have the last word.
Absolutely.
So please continue to do just that. I actually carried legislation 2 sessions ago, I think it was, because of the no-brainer situations. And ideas for legislation actually come from citizens most of the time. But I carried a piece of legislation. Someone had asked me and inquired, how come in Virginia we say that teachers, principals, doctors, professionals, if they find out about sexual assault going on, they have to report it, except for if you're a coach, an athletic director in public or private schools. And I just couldn't understand for the life of me why there's this loophole that if they saw or understood that something was going on between students and or an adult and a child, that it has to be reported. And so that bill we put forward, it passed. And so now we've been able to shut that loophole that was left open, wide open for coaches and athletic directors for some reason. In the case of your daughter, I'm just so happy that you're there to provide that support for her, but that we make sure that also that school system acts responsibly. And I got a hunch that you probably have already taken the path of talking to the school board members and the administration. I'm not sure what level to start with, but to make sure that you do deal with both of them and to hold both levels accountable. So whether it be the superintendent and the administration who reports to the school board, and the school board, I'm not sure in Hampton if they're appointed or if they are elected directly. So if they're elected directly to the people, then they understand they work on behalf of the people. And if we can't change your mind about the policies that are necessary, we will change your seats. And that is just the approach that you're going to have to take to get folks' attention. And they may try to play the ignore game for a little while, but if you stay to it, stay on them. And as you know, some folks have always advised me to unmute yourself and keep talking. Eventually, these other parents will come along with you to help you raise your voice to bring about the change that's going to be needed for your daughter. And I know that all of these school districts have zones that they carve out according to where you live, but that is just a blanket process. And when there are exceptions that happen according to what's going on in those situations, there are exceptions that ought to be made for those situations. And so if I were you, I would just keep my foot on the gas until somebody gives you the answer that you deserve and your daughter deserves.
Thank you so much.
Yep.
I want to roll in here with the next question. It'll be not as heavy, definitely, but it's more subjective on my side, away from the objectivity of the Beach Brothers show itself. Because a good friend of mine and fellow Norfolk State Spartan and former Beach Brothers show guest and host, DeVoris Marks, fielded a question in advance that he thought was worthy of a guest like tonight. And that's just your take on the governor's race, both as you see it right now between Gary and Glenn Youngkin, but also to shout out that, we've had on Sean Perryman a couple times on the show, and you endorsed him for lieutenant governor. And we were just curious about how it might have been possible for the Virginia Legislative Black Caucus to do a little bit more to bolster the candidates in the primary for governor, like Justin Fairfax, Jennifer Carroll Foy, or Jennifer McClellan, or if it just feels good the way it is.
So what's your question about it? I'm sorry.
Looking at how we chose Terry amongst a great field of candidates, could it have been more for the Legislative Black Caucus to speak to Fairfax and Foy and McClellan?
Oh, gotcha. Let me just say that sometimes the timing of things and the snapshot where you are doesn't necessarily paint the picture fully. And I know hindsight is always 20/20. But the truth is, along the way, it was known that Terry McAuliffe had planned to run, right? And it was known that he had already served, and people had an interest in running, but they hadn't actually landed on the idea of running. Terry actually said he was going to come back and run at a time when there was a question mark of what was going to happen. And so Senator Lucas at the time decided to go and talk to him personally and ask him to run again. As you know, in the Commonwealth, a governor cannot succeed him or herself. And so there had to be a break in service. And such, we have Governor Northam. Senator Lucas then approached McAuliffe and asked if he would run again based on the performance of what was able to be accomplished as a Democratic governor, even with a Republican-controlled House and Senate. And we still were able to get many gains and momentum even under those terms. Obviously, you see under now a Democratic governor, a Democratic House-controlled legislature, and a Democratic Senate-controlled legislature, man, we have been able to fast forward policy to those who need it most in a light by light years and warp speed in the last couple of years. And so with that being the case, continuing on with that Democratic governor and with both chambers under Democratic leadership and control, we seem to think that McAuliffe was going to be a great fit for that situation. After he had agreed to run and started working with the legislature behind the scenes, some other folks began to jump in the race. Now, I am not naive. I love my people through and through, but I'm not naive enough to think that even after this is happening and going, if there were one individual running, okay, now we're talking. But when you have three of them, and all of them are super talented, intelligent people in Fairfax, in the two Jennifers, as I call them, Jennifer Carafoy and Jennifer McClellan. I mean, just super smart, intelligent people. But when you get three African Americans in the race in a primary, right, in a primary, the numbers are not going to work out because they're going to pull a certain segment of the vote for them individually, ultimately splitting that vote, splitting that support, if you will. And so we needed to get behind who I believe is going to bring the fervor, the energy, etc., going into this November that we're going to need. We have, as you know, not only a governor, lieutenant governor, and AG's race, but our entire House of Delegates is up for re-election. And so we need the unity, we need the energy and togetherness to be able to sustain the leadership level that we have even now. And I'm so excited that we're in a position to do so. I just so happen to be the first person to have endorsed Terry McAuliffe in his first run for public office here in the Commonwealth. And I think that he has proven himself, and I'm excited to support him. I'm excited to support all three on our ticket because we have got to now focus on November. Can't sit there with our arms folded, pouting about what we thought should have happened in the primary. The truth is, first inning is over. Now it's time that we move to the next inning and move towards November unified so that we can win and re-elect and keep control of the House of Delegates and the top three positions as well.
Agreed. It's I'm taking the position of not if but when the Democratic Party wins the executive leadership of our Commonwealth again. Do you think that this might be the time where the General Assembly could pass legislation in order for governors and lieutenant governors and AGs to run for, well, more so governors, to run for consecutive terms, since Virginia is one of the few states that does not allow consecutive runs by the governor.
That's certainly something that we need to get behind. And I believe, because in 4 years, just think about what goes on as you watch the process, right? When a governor gets elected and comes into office, because Virginia has a 2-year budget cycle, that person that just got elected as governor literally is carrying out the budget of the previous governor. They don't even get their own budget the first year that they're coming in. Then by the time it's time for them to set their own budget, which is only once during that term, they're on their way out. So by the time you get your policies and things in place, obviously we know what goes along with that is the meat on the bone, the funding to go along with the policy that you want. It would be so much better, I think, for an administration to be able to have things in motion and say, look, we want to continue on the path and the trajectory that we're on by funding the things that we want to see implemented. And that's, I think, something that hamstrings the Commonwealth in a lot of ways. So I'm certainly willing to fight to see that Virginia's constitution changes to allow for a governor to succeed himself. Now, what we've got to do, however, is to try to fight in such a way that it doesn't impact the person in office at the time. You know, I'm not in it for anything that's going to look selfish for individuals, but the policy itself. It's not about the individual, whoever the individual is. It's about good policy. Just like we went and fought hard to change the date for local elections. The mayor, the city council, and school board elections have been held in so many localities in May. And a lot of people don't even know that that's going on, that there's an election going on. As much as people like us follow the process closely and we know that it's going on, but look at the numbers of participation. Most people didn't even know that a certain election for their mayor, their city council, their school board members were going on in May. And so you have a small portion of the electorate that are participating. You move that to November, and guess what? We're going to be in a situation where, as a democracy ought to be, where you get as much participation as possible in the process. I think Virginia Beach had already moved theirs to November.
Yep.
A lot of localities had not. But the people, the citizens, had been asking and begging for their local government to change the charter locally, to change it to November. And it just fell on deaf ears. They weren't willing to change the date. They weren't even willing to put it on the ballot and let the citizens vote on it. They wouldn't even do that. And so, as a Dillon Rule state, as we are, as a Commonwealth, if we create legislation to say, move all local elections to November, then that can happen. And while we were hearing Senator Lionel Spruill's bill in committees, guess what happened? People from all over Virginia signed up to speak, begging from all over the Commonwealth, asking for the date to be moved. But guess who didn't want to move the date? Elected officials sitting in their positions, trying to serve forever and protect themselves by keeping it in May. And by the way, hats off to Virginia Beach, and I think it was Delegate Fowler, Kelly Fowler. that led the charge to get rid of this fake ward system. It was a fake ward system. You're pretending like people where they live can control who's representing them, when at the same time, yeah, you had to live in a district to represent a certain ward, but folks on the other side of town could cancel out what the wishes of the people were in their district or their ward. So that wasn't, a real way of providing full participation and representation of the people. And so hats off to Delegate Fowler, for proposing that bill. And then, of course, the General Assembly, democratically led, I might add, made that change for the citizens. And so it's important to remember, all of the folks on this StreamYard tonight, please remember that all of the gains that you've seen happening, the momentum, the excitement, and the relief, the lifelines that have been given to the people, all of these gains have happened by way of democratically controlled legislatures in the top three. And make no mistake about it, if we lose the majority, it will be erased. So we need to do all we can to put a shoulder to the wheel and help this democratic vehicle continue the momentum and forward progress that we have been able to make in these recent years.
Definitely sounds like a plan going forward. As we near the end of the show tonight, I sort of want to allow you to have your opportunity to sort of give us a closing pitch. We've heard what's great about the 77th. Now we sort of want to hear from you going into the race. What do you still want to do in the state legislature to help grow our communities for the better?
Yeah, we just want to keep this momentum going for healthcare accessibility and to grow ways that we can improve healthcare for the Commonwealth and its citizens. We're going to continue to work in that regard. When it comes to education, we're going to continue fighting for education for all of our students in these school systems and across the Commonwealth of Virginia. And of course, when it comes to criminal justice reform, that we look at critically the systems that we have in place and to make sure that we are not a Commonwealth that continues to find ways to constrain folks and arrest folks that do not need to be arrested. We have a terrible problem with our behavioral health in jails, in which most people serving time in jails, and I'm telling you by personal experience, do not deserve to be incarcerated. A large portion of the prison and local jail population are folks with SMI, serious mental illness of some sort, and they need help. So we need to fund behavioral health improvements here in the Commonwealth of Virginia to make sure we continue that path. When it comes to technology, we know that we are in the age of the Internet of Things and how connected we are in its use. And so cybersecurity and the protection thereof, of how we're connected in all of these various ways, that we're able to allow our government entities and in our private lives, that we are able to create platforms that are secure for our consumers and our citizens.
Thank you very much for all this and invigorating topics tonight, and your opinion on all these matters, from fatherhood to the state legislature. So glad to have you on. This has also been a broadcast in part with the HRBC. So we're definitely going to look to have you on again in the future, because we're going to test out some more policy-based questions the next time we have you on, which hopefully be on before November. So again, I want to thank you, the Honorable Delegate Hayes, for coming on and just having fun.
The pleasure has been mine.
Thank you so much. I hope you have a great night tonight. Also, Ms. Nikki, what might be your final thoughts that you've had tonight going on with our guests and just being a co-host on the Beach Brothers Show?
Well, I want to thank Delegate Hayes for number one, just his honest response to the questions that I had in regards to Celeste. Because of course that has been, my push, for, just to get as many answers as possible so that, the best possible outcome for her can be reached. I also want to take a moment, because obviously I'm not a father, but I do want to give a huge shout out to the love of my life and the father of my three, my husband, Richard. We are partners in raising, both of our daughters and our son. And I appreciate him more than he'll ever realize. And so I do want to, take a moment to give him the credit that he is due for being an amazing father and husband. I'm just really honored that you guys asked me to guest host. And I've really enjoyed having the ability to be on the Beach Brothers Show and, to, lend my voice to, amazing topics and, intense and bright discussion.
It's been great to have you on again. I just love sitting down, talking politics and business in the Tidewater and Virginia area. It's great to have you on. Definitely look forward to having you on more so in the future as well, because remember, this is first and foremost a Beach Brothers show, and that's every Thursday at 7:15. We're going to have on some great politics guests and business guests from time to time. So always look forward to 7:15 on Thursdays for that. Unless we have a special engagement show. As you may also notice, this is a Hampton Roads Black Caucus production tonight as well. So also look forward to joining them. And we're going to look forward to have some good sort of more streams with HRBC going forward, to have some hard-hitting community-based and improvement questions for all the upcoming politicians in this year's races. So make sure to look forward to that as well. And definitely join the organization, Beach Brothers Show viewers, and both watch us every Thursday night. And of course, don't forget about some great businesses like Southern Volkswagen. Go and see Charlie Roy. Get yourself a nice car to cruise around the 757 in. And I want to wish all of you guys a great Thursday night. And we'll close out now with some great information from our fellow beach brother, Mr. Jose Cruz.
It's never too early or too late to plan for retirement. Let me show you how to protect yourself, your loved ones, and your assets from loss due to catastrophic decisions that may affect you the rest of your life. Please call me.
This show was brought to you by Positive Vibes Incorporated, our consulting services. We do credit fixes, we do tax resolution, we lend private money and debt consolidation. So if you need some of these services, we're waiting here for you. Credit fixes, tax resolutions, private money, and debt consolidation. Make sure you call Positive Vibes Incorporated.